much, I think it'll be kind of to assess the audience. How many people have heard of Evermore? Show of hands? Oh, that's a good sign. How many people have actually gone to Evermore? Oh, even better. Wow, surprising. How many people have gone more than once to Evermore? All right, excellent. So, what is Evermore is definitely the kind of buzzing question. I'm going to take a moment, introduce my people here, and then we're going to ask them as well, what is Evermore to them? Because being on this side of things, it's a little different for a lot of us. Working for all of us here at Evermore, we wear many hats. We're a very small team of about 15, 20 people that try to do a lot of the narrative and creative aspects, which is insane. And so that being said, I am Bobby Cody. I am the showrunner for Evermore. Most people go, oh, showrunner, that sounds cool, but what does it mean? I'm pretty much over creative. I have creative authority and kind of final on a lot of the things that go into the park and that guests are able to participate in. Everything from even menu selection that we try to tie into story as well, to costuming, characters, games, special effects, all that, lighting, sound, so many things. And then I'm also over the production management side of things, just trying to make sure that everyone is doing what they can do within the confines of our budget, which is glorious. So I'm going to turn it over now. I'm going to introduce, we'll start with Trevor here. And so Trevor, kind of introduce yourself and the primary responsibility of what you do at Evermore.
So, as introduced, I'm Trevor Ballard. I have been working with Evermore ever since Lore 2018. I was hired on initially as an actor, but since then I have expanded my responsibilities with the team, and I have been working with the story writing team, primarily focusing upon system development and also world building.
I'm Mallory deForest. I also started working as an actor, but I am now head of narrative. So I make sure that story is kind of heading in the direction it's supposed to.
I'm Chancellor Prey. I started as the Games Master, and I'm still currently the Games Master. Actually, I guess I started as Games Master and became an actor.
Yeah.
That's how it turned out. My primary responsibility in the park is to make sure engagement is as clean as it can be, as well as even though it's a complex working theory that works all around the clock while the park is open, it's making sure every cog is in place, is operating as efficiently as it can to make sure that the experience and the magic circle is about as small as it can be. So when you walk into the park, you're engaged as fast as you can be.
Hi, I'm Tyrell Clement. I started out as an actor as well, back in 2018. I'm now helping with character creation and development, so I help keep track of all the individual character storylines and character objectives so that Mallory doesn't have all of that on her plate as well.
Hi, I'm Mandy Johnson. I also started as an actor in Lore 2018, and currently I am over the Gazette, which is our newspaper that comes out every single week, and over romance and relationships, because that can get muddled very easily.
All right, so instead of kind of doing like a typical kind of keynote, I really wanted more to kind of honor my teams today, the amazing people that keep me looking good. So I have some questions that I'm going to ask them to kind of prompt a Q&A a little bit. Also later this afternoon, we'll have more of an open session for Q&A. We'll even have our creature effects and makeup and costuming people there to answer more questions as well. So first and foremost, what is Evermore to you?
Evermore to me is the absolute perfect blending of both an immersive experience and also a gameplay experience. I am a passionate video gamer. I've been playing MMOs in particular ever since the release of EverQuest back in 1999. And I've always been hooked on this idea of going into this digital space and exploring this world that's completely new and alien to you, and experiencing it not only as a video game, but also as an experience. Evermore is taking that to the next level. Evermore is an MMO brought to reality. So Evermore to me is this new, exciting world that I can go and I can experience. I can make my character, but I'm not restricted by a game engine anymore. I'm not restricted by the choices that that game engine forces on me. I can choose whatever race I want to play. I can choose whatever class I want to play. And I can play however I want to. I can have a tragic story. I can have a heroic story. I can have whatever story I want within Evermore. And what's more, I can come to Evermore and I can present this story to the actors within Evermore and have that story returned back to me. So I can have this living, breathing experience that allows me to step outside of the shell of the real world and grasp onto something else for a few hours that allows me to participate in the real world with a new, expanded understanding that's founded upon the experiences in Evermore.
I think that was rehearsed.
Yeah, right. It's an interesting question. So as a head of narrative, Evermore to me is a living city that the tourist visitors, we call world walkers, all the patrons, are also living at the same time as the residents, the actors. And so it's that blending of what is a living city and what are the problems that it faces, and how can we tell that in the best way possible? Because sometimes we do get mired down in things like law and important things like ethics, and you have to remember, like, oh yeah, no, this is a living city that people are coming to, and they want the full experience, they want to live there. And so we have to balance fun storytelling and, ooh, is this pretty, look at the shiny thing, with people who actually live there. But then as a fan myself of our own work and the wonderful things everyone puts into it, it's a place where I get to come, pretend, and play, and live, and not be. I can be myself and get to be cooler than I normally am, or I get to pretend to be someone else, which is just exciting.
And to add on to what you were just saying, Mal, what I love is it's so different for each person as an audience member of how immersed you get into something and what can pull you out of immersion. I always think about my grandfather. The moment they fire more than 6 shots from a gun, he would change the channel. He's like, this is not real, So it's as much as we like to, as a film, you get away with a lot of things. Even theater, you get away with a lot of things of not explaining it. Whereas with Evermore, you could have someone who is highly adept in 19th century law that will grill your attorney character to make sure that they know the law on the level that they should, or else it could break their immersion. So it's a fine line. It's a crazy line.
Evermore to me since October 2nd has been my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it's where I contemplated sleeping.
We do have the facility for it.
We do. We have a futon at the top. We have a lovely mini fridge. And a couch. And much to my wife's dismay, that thought of sleeping there has crossed my mind one too many times. But in reality, it's a magic you almost can't explain. The best way I can explain it is the night that a dedicated world walker of ours came up to me as, I know, still kind of new, still kind of fresh, a fresh face, but she came up to me and asked if she could destroy a suicide note that she had written for herself not too long ago. And over the course of the night, we sat her down and talked to her, and we let her burn it in the fairy gardens, which is one of the most magical spots in the park. And that is the best way I can identify to you all what Evermore feels like. And that's what it is to me.
That social engagement sometimes. It's for us, it's a fine line to blending entertainment with reality, and giving the actors and performers the skills and tools to be able to handle a lot of these situations delicately is something we have to deal with modern audiences that film actors and theater actors never have to really deal with.
For me, I guess Evermore's, well, I guess the best way I can put it, it's about connection. Whether that be from the World Walkers' point of view, the guests, or from the actors' point of view, or from our shop's point of view, it's about connecting with someone or something in this world and just having that moment of being present with someone else. You get a lot of those beautiful moments in park where everything else just kind of falls away, and it doesn't matter what your backstory is or where the other person has come from or what their walk of life is. They're just happy to be there, having that wonderful experience with you. It's what I believe that many of us seek in just our every day-to-day lives, whether that be through relationships or whether it be through taking a walk in nature. It's that connection with the things around us.
So true.
Everything they said, I could echo 100 times over. But Evermore for me, I kind of fell into this. To give you a little bit of backstory, I hadn't acted in probably 7 to 8 years, and my husband's like, you should do this. Why? Why not? Okay. And what Evermore has turned into me is a place to find the best me. I've had the opportunity to play 5 to 6 characters who had different arcs, and I walk away going, what did I learn from this person? How did this person better myself? And then on the opposite, how can I help someone else? It's a place to freely explore who you are and who you want to be without fear of ridicule. And for me, that's one of the most magical things about Evermore.
Excellent. What is Evermore to me? I would say overall, everything. In so many ways. I've passed most of my life, it almost seems like I've been preparing to work at a place and do this kind of work, from LARPs to working in the game industry to working in film and theater for decades, on all different sides, from technical aspects. It's definitely helped to fill that role of showrunner, which is something we really, really needed in the park. I took over as the showrunner at the end of September last year, in the middle of one of our busiest seasons, and with the people, not just up here, but even some of my fabricators and artists out there, kind of up there in the back. They're back there in those cheap seats. We pulled off an amazing season, and I feel like even our winter season has been one of the best that we've had yet. We're really, really looking forward to what we have all come up with for 2020, and I'll have a little bit of a sneak peek at that I can share with you guys, with us moving forward. Moving on to the next question. How does the creative writing process go in Evermore? Because we have a lot of writers here for LTUE, and so I think this is one that probably all of you could answer in some capacity, because it varies from us working on individual basis to us working as groups, and then even us working as subcommittees on very specific things. From my end of it is I kind of look at the vision that we have as a season, and then we share that vision, and you hope that everyone else can kind of contribute to it as well. It's such a nice little balance that has to happen. So everyone feels like their voice is heard and that they're being able to express artistically in the process as well. On the writing end of things, we write for anywhere from 85 to 100 individual character arcs, and then we'll run anywhere from 7 to 25 story arcs, and it gets crazier upon level. Spreadsheets are definitely a godsend for us, and sometimes they don't even have the power to do what we're trying to accomplish. And then Trevor, what would you say the creative writing process is for you?
Well, I'll answer it specifically from my perspective. So to clarify what I said earlier, when I say systems development, the systems development that I do are specifically oriented with world building. So I do a lot of building in regards to the magic system of Evermore, the ecological systems, the evolutionary development of the various different monsters and whatnot that we have in the park. In fact, my beginning into that foray in writing for the team actually began when I was cast as Aiden Torin, the Dragon Trainer. And knowing the experience of Evermore, knowing that I would be working with very passionate dragon fans from all over, I knew immediately that we were going to need to establish a very robust system of dragons, because dragon fans are their own unique breed. And so I started right away developing phylogenies, taxonomies, biological systems, physiologies, anatomies, whatnot, for various different kinds of dragons. And the team at that time kind of approved of the ideas that I had, and that's kind of when that invitation was extended a little bit more toward development in general. Now, there's an interesting problem narratively in that you need to have systems and worlds concrete and solid so you can build from them. But if you go and you watch Groundhog Day, no one cares why Bill Murray's neighbor says. That's not the point of the story. It doesn't ever have to be told to the audience. It never has to be communicated to the audience why that happens. So the question of why is that important is, of course, a very important one to answer. And having played Aiden Torin and having answered literally hundreds of different guests' questions about, all right, why does this dragon's eggshell have scales on it instead of being like a chicken egg? It actually is very important in Evermore, because you have this very wide range of guests that you have to tailor to. A lot of the guests aren't going to care. A lot of the guests are going to see a dragon and say, that's really cool, on to the next. Whereas some guests will come see a dragon, and they will be spending the next 5 hours of their night there with you, doing nothing except talking to you about dragons.
Anatomy, habitat, yeah.
Anything that you can imagine is asked about dragons. And this extends, of course, to the various other different parts of the world. Our knights are asked all the time about their various different knightly orders upon a different world from Earth. Our coven members are asked all the time about how magic works. It's this interesting narrative experience where all of these very deep, very specific questions about the world are asked of the actors. And so you need to have that concrete foundation in order to build everything else off of. One of my favorite things is actually when the narrative team, Mallory in particular, throws me a curveball and says, hey, we need this to work. We need this narrative scene to happen. We need this character to have this arc. Is that possible? And of course the answer is always yes. But how do we get to the yes? And sometimes that journey, getting from our concrete foundation of how our worlds and our magic system works, to where we can answer that question for that character. And then sometimes it's a 5-minute answer, sometimes it's an entire weekend of brainstorming.
Yeah.
And that is one of just many hurdles that we have to overcome writing for narrative. It's just figuring out how we can make everything consistent, make everything work within the systems we have established, and most importantly, getting past that Groundhog Day problem of how we can answer this question for every one of our guests.
Kind of to add to that, almost like if we were trying to turn this into an advertisement, Evermore is a place of high fantasy supported by hard science. So we really want to make sure, because the level of reality that we kind of get confronted with, you can't just go, because magic. You know, it works for Harry Potter, it works for a lot of other things, but it just doesn't work in this type of medium.
The creative writing process is a huge team effort. A lot of it is, Bobby Shaw, but most of Bobby lays the groundwork of like, here's the overarching thing, here's the theme of the season. And then we look at what actors we have available, we look at what the shop can create. And the nice thing is that on my end at least, story and narrative is the easiest thing to change. We can change that on a dime for the most part. Our actors are amazing at getting last minute changes. I'm so blessed. We're all so blessed to have the amazing team that we do. But we rely a lot on the actors and the team to present ideas, and then we bring them into a small writers' room that we have created together, and we talk about it on the table, and we talk about, okay, this character feels like they're going in this trajectory. Does this match our overarching theme? Does this, and can we provide this for this actor? Is this something also that can be shown, not told, or is it tell, not show? We need to balance that. There's only so much of, well, I went to the story yesterday that that happened off stage that people want to hear. It's like, oh yeah, I fought a huge dragon and slayed it. It's like, cool, I wanted to watch that.
Yeah.
And we're not a television show. We can't just cut to, backstory. We have to balance how much of this is just something that is told and therefore probably not necessary.
And the pacing of that.
And pacing of
as
that.
we reveal and as we, release it to the audience.
Yes. So yeah, we rely a lot on people providing ideas for us that we can then, and a lot of times it's someone can write a really long 2-page summary of an idea, and there's a German there that's just perfect. We get back to them and be like, okay, this one sentence you wrote, we love that. Or do you mind if we take it and make it, or do you want to retool it and to fit that? And so then it becomes a very collective process of working all together.
That's my phone.
That's Mandy's phone bringing behind us here. That's the beautiful thing about our creative writing process is it is a huge team effort, and I'm just merely a guiding hand. I would not be able to do it with anyone at this table in our creative studio or our actors, 110%.
That was one of our actors calling me.
And in that process too, just to add to what Mal's saying, I'm going to kind of add a little to everyone apparently. It's about a 70-30 ratio between us on the writing side. Is about 70% of the work is being done, and then we always try to include an actor in the process. That's part of our a little bit of our secret of how we get them to really embody the characters that they're playing.
And they're the boots on the ground, so they know what's
Yeah,
happening.
because we can write something brilliant in the writer's room and it just flop in the park.
Anyone else want to take a crack at this?
I do. One thing we also have to think about is longevity. So sometimes actors will present something like, oh, that's great. How long is this going to take to pay off? Because we're playing the long game, not necessarily the short game. So with relationships in general, oh, we want to do this huge thing. Great. Where is this going? And that's a question we have to ask across the board. Where is this plot line going? Where is this relationship going? Where is this scene going? And where is this season going? Because if we can't answer that, it's not going to come across, or it's not going to be as satisfying for our audience.
Yeah, Chance loves us to play the why game, which is we ask why until we can't ask it anymore. And then we know, okay, well, at least we have something that can hold up. And then we look at it and go, what is it good? At that point. Awesome. With a 4-season model, how far in advance do you all have prepped moving forward? Who would like to answer that one?
The shift that happened when Bobby took over was founding everything into a space of constructed reality, and that means that every time we've talked about the world or realm of mythos, the world or realm of lore, what are we actually talking about? So the Eververse is being built, and that's exactly where Trevor has actually been heading up this whole time. Down to the molecular levels and quantum levels, we can tell you what type of flowers grow on this region of mythos near this town because it has this type of water supply.
It's like writing an encyclopedia. Or a science textbook.
So to prep for that, that means that we needed these realities constructed before we could even start muling over the ideas of what creatures would look like, and so that's where the shop gets involved, or what these people would wear due to the climates, and that's where the costume department gets involved. What do they look like? I mean, what do these people adorn themselves with? That's where makeup gets involved. There's the intense levels that we needed to just start with, we didn't have, and so we had to shift entirely into building the Eververse from the ground up over the last 2 months.
Yeah, 3 months, 3 months maybe.
3 months, 3 months?
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, prior to that, Evermore has been kind of running off of the model of putting the cart before the horse. And so it was more, I think originally they were thinking more spectacle rather than depth. So it was a very shallow experience, but it was a massive shallow experience. So it's like, you know, you could tiptoe through a whole bunch of little things, but nothing went anywhere. And now that rabbit hole goes really deep. As deep as you kind of want to go.
Yeah, but don't immediately come ask us all those questions, because
We won't answer.
we're still doing yeah, like, please don't ask about the molecular level of flower mythos. We just barely.
If you do, you can ask Trevor.
Yeah, ask Trevor.
All right, so how do you plan to engage an audience 10 years, even 20 years down the road with original narrative? We would like to tackle that one.
Well, I think that as our current pre-planning of world development and whatnot is concerned, I think we figured it out. We're at somewhere around 80 years of content that we have pre-planned.
Yeah. I'll be dead.
We'll be gone
see
by the
those
time we
stories.
run out of the content that we have pre-planned. Of course, that's all stuff that's not particularly concrete.
But it'd be enough for future generations to continue telling stories.
Exactly. Putting it that far down the line is actually a very interesting process of having this idea, pre-planning it, and then layer by layer making it more concrete. So an example of this is, of course, Mythos, which is one of our earlier worlds that we've kind of been trying to make a little bit more solid and robust. And going through and figuring out what size of world it needs to be, figuring out what that does to the overall gravity of the world. What sort of density do we need this world to have in order to have a plausible magnetosphere that will keep the atmosphere safe? And what impact will that gravity have on the life forms of this world? And this is content, this is development that lays foundations for works such as what sort of creatures are on Mythos. Now, one of the great things about working and developing is that we get to work so closely with our extremely brilliant shop. Our makeup team, our set design, everything in the shop is just absolutely brilliant. And of course, visually, they are one of the biggest parts of the park.
Absolutely.
And so being able to include them in this world development and see their designs and see how we can make this fit into this world is a great way for us to establish that long-term plan. Establishing plans for 1 year is already pretty challenging. Planning it 10 years out, even more so. And we need to make sure that we are staying consistent, right? Because we have guests coming into the park, and we have some very dedicated guests. We have people that are coming in every single day. We have people that are coming in since the very beginning, when the park first opened. And we hope to continue seeing them 10 years down the road. We don't never want to be cheating them out of an experience, right? We never want to be telling them, you know, that thing that was said 5 years ago. It was,
We're a product of our times.
making sure, again, that everything is founded on a concrete core is absolutely imperative if we want to do that. Making sure that our foundation is rock solid so that we can build off of that is key to having that 10-year plan, to having that 20-year plan, to having things 80 years down the road when we're all in coffins. Making that all work is all about the foundation.
And with the shop aspect too, it's including them in that process because they, like a lot of people may think of the people who are fabricating and doing all this stuff as like, oh, we're just making pretty things. But they go to the same level of research and development that we go through. So they're thinking about, well, if there's these types of metals on this world, this is the only thing they can forge their armors from. But we think of the narrative of why they would forge that particular kind of armor based off of the region that they're currently living in. And is it a necessary thing based off of if they're the apex predator of that area or if they're the prey of that area. And yeah, we're really making real worlds is what we're trying to do that make real sense. And it's not just there because it's pretty. Yeah. This will be a little more inspirational, I think. Who or what are your motivations or inspirations that you bring that you use as an influence factor in your creative process?
I'm a media junkie. The level of world building we do, I dive into Star Wars, into Doctor Who, into all the nerdy fandoms. I'm probably one of the few ones at this table who didn't start out in video games, but I am a television devourer. I just finished 4 seasons of a show in the last 2 weeks, on top of writing everything, because I don't sleep. Yeah, right. So I mean, for me, it's all about season arcs. That's why I love television so much versus movies, but also novels. I mean, it's such everyone's such a fun combination of, like, sometimes we have a really cool idea and we're like, that'd be really cool if we were a TV show. Or that would be really cool if we were writing a novel, but Evermore is this beautiful, strange blend of, and I think that's why it's so enriching to work in. It's like, okay, if I was a movie, I would do it this way. If I was a TV show, I would do it this way. If I was theater, I would do it this way. If I was a novel, I would do it this way. We can't do any of them. How do we combine that? How do we make that into what we need to do? For me, it's just being an avid fan of good storytelling. I like sci-fi, I like fantasy, I like drama, I'm a media junkie. I've devoured things, and everything is derivative to a certain extent. So you beg, borrow, and steal, but you also create anew, and it's beautiful, and a beautiful combination of that. And none of us are born in a vacuum either. So.
Yeah, and it's more of us like being inspired by is what we try to do, because we definitely admire a lot of people's, so much work. And you can't help but to be a little saturated with it, just kind of, it always being around you. What about Tyrell? Let's give Tyrell a chance to say something.
Why not? Guess I'm sitting up here, might as well. I draw a lot of my stuff from a life goal that I have to bring as much self-love and acceptance as I can to the world. I use Evermore shamelessly for this, because they let me do it in acting and through photography and just about every aspect of Evermore that I have my hands in. They allow me to pursue this life goal, and that's where I feel the most inspired, because if you're making somebody else happy, you're making somebody else's day, or you're making them forget the problems that they have, or helping them solve those problems, whatever it might be, then who doesn't want to be there? Who doesn't want that in their life?
There's nothing better when the executioner helps you solve your life problems. Oh, sadness. Which is what all right, did you want to answer?
Mine's actually a little bit unconventional. Before I started here, I was in marriage and family studies and going into law. So I've had the opportunity to see a lot of different relationships, some that work, some that don't, some that need work, and some that just seem flawless. And so when I'm looking at relationships, whether they're romantic or platonic or any spectrum of that, I'm pulling from things that I've seen in the real world or things that I would like to see. If you go into a park or even a story and all the relationships are the same, it gets boring really fast. And I also want to be able to show real world situations in a fantasy setting that people go, I relate to that. I've been through that, or I've seen someone go through that, because then people can make an emotional connection.
So we talk about being immersed in story and all these things of what is Evermore, but do the world walkers and the guests actually have any influence on changing the story? Lots of nods. So, which makes our life kind of crazy. So imagine you're writing your book and someone comes in and says, I think it should go this completely different direction in chapter 2. And you've written the entire book, and so now you're finding a way to try and make that work to your agenda. What we do use in our process is, the Italians were doing a form of theater called commedia dell'arte, and we take a lot of aspects of commedia into our performance. And commedia would basically kind of give you an outline of a scene, so it tells you kind of what your wants and needs are as an actor in that scene, what the conflict is in that scene, and what the final outcome needs to be in that scene. And we use a lot of that in how we communicate with our actors. It also keeps our actors from being so pigeonholed to to holding all these lines of script and everything that becomes, we don't have the opportunity to rehearse enough to the point that it doesn't seem like a rehearsal. And that's a gift that theater gets to do, is you rehearse so much that it doesn't seem like it was ever rehearsed. You can really practice the natural kind of presentation of it. Whereas we just get like a 3-day boot camp rehearsal and we just run them through the ringer, and then push them out into the park, and then just try to support them as much as we can. What does a living story really mean? When we say Evermore is a living story, what does that mean? A living story? Aren't all stories kind of living in a sense, but what do we mean by living story?
I'll take a shot at this one. For me, like the living story aspect comes in from after Mallory and Chance and all of us have gone through and created this wonderful story narrative. It's that moment in park when somebody else comes up to you and says, hey, you know that was supposed to happen tonight? We're not doing that anymore. Because this happened over here with this person, and they had a wonderful interaction with the World Walker, so it's changing slightly. This is the overall concept. Go.
Yeah, rewriting in park.
It normally sounds like
Yeah.
everything that we had just went sideways. Do this over here at this time now. Get going.
There are those evenings too. Or
Throw it all out.
Or, yeah, the winds are at 40 miles per hour. We can't have that at that particular location. Shift very quickly. Now everything's happening indoors. That's definitely part of the living story aspect as well.
We have story meetings every week, so we have to, the first thing we do is, okay, here's the things we wanted to do this Saturday. Why can't we do them anymore? What details from last week need to be carried over? So-and-so sent in an email saying that this really cool interaction with the World Walker, it spawned this idea. Can we pay that off? That's the big thing for living me is that week by week by week we are revisiting whatever we said we were going to do that week and changing it to fit whatever the World Walkers both gave us and took away from it. And it was like, oh, this actor said this one thing here, this spawned a whole new idea. We've had entire narrative things that came from two actors, shooting the breeze, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that was a thing. Cool, and then all of a sudden it becomes our B plot for the rest of the season. It's the thing that happens. That's what living story is to me, is the fact that week by week by week we have to revisit and change, which you can't do with a TV show.
And living story for me is, it's living, it's breathing. It's not the same experience every time you go. Anyone who's gone multiple times can tell you that, yeah, there's some familiarity there. There's some of a feeling of like, oh yeah, these people were in this particular place. I usually can find them there, but your interactions will always change. The events of the night are constantly changing. As your day goes from day to night to next day, so does that of the citizens in Evermore and the story that we're writing and telling. We're at about 5 minutes when we should end this, but I'm going to kind of look at JJ for a moment and see, like, since we're the panel after this, could I do at least like just a short little 10-minute kind of Q&A back and let the audience kind of ask us some stuff?
Okay.
I've twisted your arm just a little bit. So at this point in time, we have an hour or 45-minute long session this afternoon for a more extensive Q&A. So if you're wanting to return and ask us some more in-depth things, but at this point in time, I would really like to turn it over to you guys. Since we gave you a little bit of what it is, I mean, we could probably spend a 5-hour session just talking about this end of things, and then our people in the creative and workshop aspect of it could take another 5 hours as well. So, yes. So we post auditions. This year we did auditions for the entire year. so that way we could go ahead and really start helping all of our costumers and creature effects and practical effects and stuff be able to start preparing for the design for 2 seasons from now, later into the year. It's a long process for them, and so we're trying to buy them as much time. We're always trying to be about 2 to 3 seasons ahead of what the current season is. But we will be holding auditions 4 additional times this year. So if you check our Facebook community, that's usually where you will find it. I would say our website, but it has been in redevelopment hell for quite a while. Yes.
Stand up.
Just gentleman back here, no.
Stand up and speak out.
What?
Stand up, speak out.
Yeah.
Assuming you guys have a Facebook page you can follow.
Yes.
Okay, and now, actual question, this is gonna be dumb, but when you said you wanted Evermore to go on for 80 years, when you guys shuffle up this world coil, will you have actors playing you as ghosts?
Possibly. If we're popular enough, if people are like, man, that character was just so great, can cast someone to be their ghost forever. We have killed characters off, and we have had them be ghosts in the park as well. That's interesting. With AR developing the way it is, absolutely. I think you'll be able to go to the mausoleum and a haunting version of Giardani will come out. Oh, bonjour, mon cher. You've come to visit me, huh? you. Or either way.
If an actor leaves mid-season, is that the end of that character, or can you recast, or does that mess up the story?
We've had situations like that. Usually we try to contract everyone out to commit to an entire season. There are situations that do happen, unfortunately, in the work environment where you have to pull a character out. We try to do our best to cover it in narrative without replacing it. It's not quite the same. So in our first season, we double cast our shows. And so you would have on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it would be, me as this fortune teller. But then on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, it'd be some other person trying to pretend to be me as a fortune teller, or the character itself. Confuse our audiences tremendously. It's also, I think, a little betrayal. It'd be like you come home and your spouse has been recast. It's just like, wait, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Depends on who did the casting, right?
For a strong example, this week's Gazette actually features one of our man. We're so bummed we lost him. He played Henry Werther. He was Marzi's husband. The actor had to go get surgery done, and so he had to enact a medical clause in his contract. So he went off to go work for a factory that his family owned, and technically we still own the IP. So if needed, or if we chose to, another character, another actor could be cast in that position. But it's just an example of this is how we have to kind of take care of things in a living story in a living world.
Then it kind of becomes a little soap opera, So I think of Days of Our Lives when Roman was killed, and they brought back this other guy, John, who they were trying to tell us was Roman, but he had face, plastic surgery, and then you later find out that no, that wasn't Roman, the real Roman is still alive, and it just gets to that level, and we don't want to turn it into a soap opera. Even though it's a serial story, we really are trying to stay away from that kind of soap opera aspect of, that happens a lot.
I was just gonna say, the function of the character gets, we can normally replace the function. So there's a fun line of like, so and so is the farmer, and if that person has to leave, then normally we can have another farmer come in. We tend not to recast the character, just recast the role that character was playing. But yeah.
So it sounds like you have a character story arc for the whole season.
Yeah.
How do you make that accessible for people who come in the middle of the season and miss all of those other events?
When you get together with your family during Thanksgiving, you only get to see them maybe once a year. How do you catch up with them? It's kind of in that sense, again, this is what you were talking about yesterday, and in your paper was like the creating that sense of initiation, but agency as well. If you're familiar enough with a character or comfortable enough socially to ask a character, you know, a lot of those details, like what has been happening with you since, you know, I heard about this catastrophic event that happened in the beginning of the season. It's that same kind of aspect. It's very socially engaging in that process, but not all of us are comfortable being social. I know for me, how I would play Evermore would be mainly as an observationist. Like, I personally don't like the fourth wall being broken in theater. I don't like to engage in that way, but I definitely would probably bring some people with me who are a little more extroverted, like that, to do those while I just kind of nerdily take my notes and stuff like that. And again, it's, if you establish relationships with these people, which is very quick to do, because despite being British, we're more friendly like American Southerners. Which we thought, well, why did we set it in England? They're, you know, extremely standoffish, especially during this time. And so it's that balance of kind of altering the culture of Evermore to fit what our guests need to engage.
Can I follow up on that, Bobby?
Yeah.
I don't think this is working, so I'll try to be as loud as I can. So, because there are people who play differently, introverts, extroverts. One thing that we have been doing recently is the Gazette. So this is out nearly every single week, and it highlights most of the main plots that are happening, main arcs. So recently there was, where World Walkers came week by week to join a certain guild, the Winter Wolves, and they've been probably in the Gazette 4 or 5 times already this season. A future wedding coming up. One of our characters is turning into a werewolf, and so the Gazette is a way for also World Walkers to catch up on things that happen or are currently happening in park without actually having to interact if they do not feel comfortable to do so.
And this year we're going to be much more of an online presence. We've been developing what we call our Evermore Bible, and that's going to be able to establish a stronger IP, recognizable characters. We're going to be doing more character insight kind of focuses and spotlights throughout the year. Definitely more of kind of a presence like at Twitch and YouTube. We're also incorporating some blog aspects, podcast aspects, as well as we're going to attempt a lot of crazy things, from possible webcomics to even radio plays set in Evermore with the characters, so that our audience, even if they're not able to attend, they can still have a little bit of Evermore to engage in while in their regular daily lives. Yes?
So you look a lot towards having a very in-depth world, and you're looking a lot towards the future of your narrative. Just wondering how much you've looked at the past of the world as well, like the social past. I'm sure you have.
Oh yeah.
Because obviously everyone comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
And in this extra ephemera that you're creating, would you at some point have these characters that are historians making histories of the past of Evermore?
We do have a historian in park.
There you go.
Yeah, and yes, the histories absolutely lead to where we're at currently in story. We also do the timey-wimey thing because we had to fix a lot of things from previous seasons. When they were doing the cart before the horse, we had to go back and try to explain a lot of those things that they have released. And so the history of the park itself, as well as the history of the story and worlds that we built, absolutely we've been developing. Yes?
Any idea when you're going to have a year pass?
We won't. So a lot of parks are trying to move away from annual passes and subscriptions, and I'm trying to convince your financial officers when Disney and everyone are like, why did we do it? It's very difficult, but we are looking at group rates, group passes. We're looking at family rates and family passes. We're looking at weekend passes, so you want to come and do a Friday, Saturday night experience, you'll be able to get a discount on that rather than buying the ticket individually. So these are things absolutely, by the time we get to our April season, which will be Mythos, we will be, hopefully with our new POS system, we'll be offering a lot more options for people to come and visit the park rather than just one flat rate for every, entrance.
And on that, we just got the X. So if you guys want to go see the Gazette that we have coming out this weekend, we have a booth in the Marriott at the very back. Like if you hit the lobby, head down into that convention area. We have a couple Realms decks available. Some of the characters will be on site there. Tell the interactive panel and send us out, Bobby.
Yep. All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you all so much for joining us today. In roughly about 8 to 10 minutes, we'll be bringing up our workshop to be able to talk about how they make all the amazing stuff we have. Thank you.